Paralysis via over-analysis. Hesitation via over-evaluation. That's what some NFL teams are doing right now as they prepare for the NFL draft. Every NFL team's been guilty of this at one time or another. Mike Fisher reporting from Frisco, home of the Dallas Cowboys, the Star, right down the street. And we're in the fishbowl, as we always are with you. 26,000 of us strong, giving away Cowboys goodies over the course of probably the next coming days as we approach 30,000 of us here in Cowboy Nation. The latest and greatest, worst example of the NFL doing this just happened. The offensive lineman, Sewell, they go do all his measurements. You know, he's got big hands, he's got big this, he's big shoulders. His wingspan, he's a big man, but his wingspan is only 80 inches. Now, just like we sometimes talk about the difference in a 40-yard dash, if this receiver runs a 4.38 and that receiver runs a 4.4 flat, how much different is it really? Like, one guy's fast and one guy's not? That kind of thinking is over-evaluation. You're overthinking it. Better not take that slow guy. He only ran a 4.4. We want the fast guy who ran a 4 flat. We want the fast guy who ran a 3.9. But it's like the same, right? You could go to a guy and say, well, listen, that 3.8 I ran, I usually run a 3.7. Okay. And the 4 flat that the guy ran, well, I don't know. We've been timing it at 4.4. He must have had his Cheerios today. So I'm not saying ignore it. In fact, I'm not saying ignore any of these things. As we discussed last night in Fish at 6, hand size, you bet hand size matters. I want to know. I want to know how big the quarterback's hands are. I want to know how often when he gets hit, the ball is going to pop out of his hand because it's not as big as another guy's hand. I want to know all those things. I discussed this today on 105.3 The Fan. And scouts I've talked to, to me, there's two kinds of scouts. Now that everybody is kind of all together on the idea that you've got to combine analytics with eye test. You know, you've got to watch the film and you got to combine all those things. I think pretty much every NFL team now, even if your scout is 80 years old, he gets that now. But I don't want to let some measurement override whether he can play. And you better get your scouting department on that page. Can he play? That needs to be like line one here. Can he play? In fact, Will McClay has 5 sentences written up on the board in his office at the Star. And one of them is something like that. Another one is, does he love football? Can he play? Does he love football? But then also, and here's where I divide two scouts that I've known over the years. Scout number one, he's watched the film. He goes to the game, watches the first half, gets in his car and drives 600 miles back home. I got to look. That's all I needed to see. Then there's my scout. Tries to get to town the night early, the night before. Especially if it's a small town, kind of bumps around a little bit in town. Hey, what do you think of old Joe who plays linebacker up there at Old State U? You go into the local saloon and you say, what do you think of Joe? And you say, well, Joe's okay. The kid's okay. But his dad, and then the bartender tells you a story about Joe's dad. Put it into the pot. Then you go to the game, but you don't go just before kickoff. You go to the game and watch all the warm-ups and watch linebacker Joe in all the warm-ups. Then he plays the first half. Then comes halftime. The guy sitting next to you leaves. He's got a 600-mile drive he's got to make. You stay. You watch the second half, and you're writing down all your remarks and all the rest. And then the game's over. And you still stay. Because now you're going to watch Joe and how he interacts with his teammates after a win, or especially after a loss. How does he interact with the other team? Does he go over to the other team and shake hands with the coach or the opposing quarterback or whatever? Does he kneel in prayer? I want to know. Does he cry after a loss? Does it hurt him? Or is he cutting up? Again, I'm not drafting a guy because he's laughing after a loss. That's a mistake we all make when we're watching TV. There's no way to know or to instruct someone how they must mourn, whether it's a death or a loss of a football game. So I'm not saying I judge it. I'm just saying I want to know it. Now he's out in the parking lot, and scout number 2 is still there. Now he's in the parking lot. He's sitting in his car, and he's looking around, and he's watching, and he sees Joe. And he sees Joe go over to his dad, and they seem to have a chilly relationship. Joe goes over to his mom, and he starts yapping at his mom. Uh-oh, I'm going to put that in my notes. Then Joe, the linebacker, gets in his car, and he squeals his car out of the student parking lot. Oh, I'm putting that in my notes too. Scout number 2 does not just scout a player for an hour. He scouts that player and all his teammates and everybody on the other team too for the entirety of a day, if you can. That's a scout. That's how you do it. That's how it's done right. That's my scout. So you get to know Sewell and put everything you want into his filing cabinet, put it all in the gumbo and stir it around. And in the end, Sewell, a month ago, a lot of scouts thought was the 3rd best player in this draft. Now all of a sudden, his arms are too short. He didn't change. Nothing changed. Now somebody might say, well, I thought he was going to dominate at tackle. Shorter arms, he might have to dominate at guard. That's a consideration. We did note the other day, though, that Kyle Pitts has the longest arms of any pass catcher who's been in the combine measured in the last 20 years. And his wingspan was 84. Okay? So when a guy has a wingspan of 80, it's not like he's Tyrannosaurus Rex. His wingspan's 80. It's still wide, long. Just maybe not relative to what you prefer, maybe not relative necessarily to his body. Again, by the way, if he was Tyrannosaurus Rex, you would have already seen it. You would have noticed, man, that guy, I mean, you can see it. That guy's got short arms for a big guy. That's not the case here, is it? So, paralysis through overanalysis. As I said to Brian Broaddus today, I got a scout. You know, he handles a region or he handles a position or whatever. Once upon a time, you know, the Cowboys and most other teams, they had a West Coast scout. Okay? That guy, now in the case of Sewell, Brian points out, and he didn't play this last year. So maybe he's a bad example of this, but still, if you're a West Coast scout, you probably saw Sewell play in high school. I know guys that saw Tyron Smith play in high school. NFL people. That they made themselves aware of what Tyron Smith was doing in high school. So again, that's my scout. That's scout number 2. I want to know everything about him. I'm willing to change my mind. But paralysis through overanalysis. A scout will spend 15 months on a guy, on a kid. And then his team gets on the clock, and in 15 minutes they screw it up. Because the owner wants to draft Dwayne Haskins. Because the defensive coordinator decides that he really likes this guy's traits. Or he went to lunch with him one time, and they had a good time. Famously, the story that I tell about Randy Moss, and listen, Randy Moss was a pain. He was a pain to deal with as a player. That's a fact. He's also a Hall of Famer. But teams, starting with the Bears, and certainly including the Cowboys, and then Brian Broaddus will tell us his Eagles too, which I'll get to in a minute. as the story goes, Randy Moss arrived in Chicago for a pre-draft breakfast with the Bears. And it must have been one of the McCaskies, I think, was there to meet him among the party. He showed up late. He came down with hair that, this is, what year is this? 19, is this 19, how long is it? This is decades ago now. Randy Moss comes down with his hair, comes down late. If you're a 6-year-old white guy, this isn't your kind of hair. If you're a multi-millionaire businessman, showing up late probably isn't your thing either. And then I believe the story goes that Randy Moss came down from his hotel suite that the Bears were paying for and came into the lobby and sat down for breakfast. And I believe the story goes he was wearing pajama bottoms. And the McCaskies didn't like that. And I'm not saying they were wrong about not liking it. I'm saying they weren't up to the times. Guys were starting to wear their hair that way. Pajama bottoms. My son graduated from high school, now, was it my oldest son? 2009? Senior year, all the cool kids were wearing pajama bottoms and slippers to school. Big deal. I didn't get it, but big deal. Broaddus says that Jeffrey Lurie told the Eagles scouting department, and Broaddus was a part of it at the time, I met Randy Moss, take him off our board. Lurie later said, I learned a lesson from that. I was wrong. I didn't understand what 20-year-olds were about. And then, of course, they later were happy to employ Michael Vick. Jeffrey Lurie having learned a lesson about, you got to bend a little bit to what this guy is today. I'm 60, he's 20. And then Broaddus points out Randy Moss, and you know all the Randy Moss Cowboys stories, and I've told you about Jerry Jones and how he was listening to the radio saying, you can't do another Irvin, and that influenced him. Dwayne Painter, I think was a wide receiver coach at that time, he stood up in the room too, representing the Cowboys, and said, I don't like him. I like him as a player. I met him. I don't like him. Well, I don't know how old Dwayne was at the time, 40 or whatever he was. Well, 40-year-olds and 20-year-olds don't always see eye to eye on stuff. And so, listen, trust me, I watch 20-year-olds now on TV, and I'm going, why's that guy got tattoos all over his arm? I don't get it. I'm not supposed to get it. Why's that guy have green hair? I don't know. I'm not supposed to get it. Why is Lil Nas selling devil shoes? Well, because he's trying to make money. He will sell angel shoes next year if there's a profit in it. And I don't know, I'm not a lawyer, nor am I a rap expert. I don't think it has anything to do with Nike. I think Lil Nas is trying to freak you out. Is trying to freak the parents out so the kids will go, yeah, my parents are freaked out. I'm going to buy a Lil Nas album. The same way that Alice Cooper, Kiss, and Elvis Presley once did. Frank Sinatra once did. It's the same thing, only now with devil's blood. So evaluate it all, Cowboys. Sewell and Pitts and everybody in between, up and down, all of it. Put all of your information into the gumbo. By the way, thank you for hitting alert so you know what's coming. Thank you for hitting the like button. I'm just now learning that when you guys hit the like button, it increases the algorithms, which make us all happy. And then, of course, please do subscribe and join our club of about 26,000 in Cowboys Nation who very quickly have assembled here to discuss Dallas Cowboys football and Dallas sports in general. We'll be talking some Rick Carlisle as the Mavericks are at the Knicks. And then we've got Fish at 6 tonight. And we'll expand on a lot of our conversations that we're having regarding the Cowboys and the draft and the who's who. So get your questions ready. Fish at 6 is coming up tonight, 6 Central here in the Fishbowl. Evaluate? Yes. Analyze? Yes. Paralysis from too much analysis? Be careful with that one, Cowboys. Fish, out.